Let's unpack this. You picture a picnic, right? Maybe it's a sunny day, a blanket spread out on the grass, maybe a wicker basket, some sandwiches, lemonade. It feels simple, like a fundamental human pleasure.
It is. It's this kind of timeless image, isn't it? Leisure, relaxation, just taking a break from the everyday to enjoy food and company outdoors. Almost universally appealing, you'd think.
And yet, is that really all there is to it? Or is there maybe more packed into that seemingly straightforward act, that little wicker basket of history and culture, than meets the eye? We're going to take a deep dive today into the humble picnic, looking at some detailed sources, like a really comprehensive exploration from Wikipedia to uncover its surprising origins, its evolution, and some hidden depths you might never have guessed were there.
Yeah, get ready for quite a journey. We're talking everything from drunken, food-obsessed soldiers and secretive aristocratic societies meeting indoors, believe it or not.
Indoors, okay.
Yeah, all the way to extravagant Victorian banquets laid out on the grass, major political moments, and even, mysterious disappearances and theories about aliens.
Right. Suddenly that simple sandwich feels a little heavier, doesn't it? So where do we even begin? Let's maybe start with the basics, drawing from the source material. What exactly is a picnic by definition?
Okay, so the core definition from the source is basically a meal taken outdoors. Al fresco usually is part of an excursion.
Right.
It's often enjoyed in scenic surroundings, maybe a park or by a lake, or sometimes it's linked to a public event, like, say, before an open-air concert or something.
Okay, so the key distinction seems to be that it requires free time away from just eating at home. You're sort of making a point of going somewhere else.
Precisely. And while, the classic image is sitting on the ground on a rug or a blanket, the source does note that using tables and chairs is also possible, maybe less common for this sort of core idea, but it happens.
And the range of formality is huge, isn't it? I mean, the source mentioned everything from disposable plates and paper napkins right up to silver cutlery and crystal wine glasses.
Oh, absolutely. It really spans the spectrum. And the source also points out the common variation of the potluck, where each person contributes a dish, which is, a very practical approach.
Makes sense. And the food is almost always cold, too. Sandwiches, finger foods, cold meats, fruit, salads, chilled drinks. The source makes a point that hot food is rare, which I guess makes sense logistically.
Yeah, practicality and portability are definitely key. And of course, public spaces have adapted over time. Parks often offer amenities now, like picnic tables, grills, water fountains, trash cans, restrooms, even gazebo sometimes. It just makes the whole thing easier to manage.
Okay, that gives us the definition. But let's talk about the name itself. Picnic. It sounds French, right? But the history of the word is surprisingly twisty, according to the source.
It absolutely does come from French, pique-nique. What's interesting, though, is the source suggests it might have even passed through German as picnic before landing in English. But yeah, the root is definitely French.
And breaking down pique-nique, piquet and nique, what do those mean?
So piquet means something like to pick or peck or even nab. And nique is translated as a thing of little importance, a bagatelle, a trifle.
So pick a trifle. That doesn't really evoke images of rolling hills and gourmet baskets, does it? It sounds almost haphazard or maybe a bit dismissive.
Exactly. And that's where the earliest documented use in French gets really revealing. The source points to the 1649 anonymous broadside. It was a piece of burlesque verse during the Fronde Civil War titled Les charmants effets des barricades, ou l'amitié durable de la compagnie des frères Bachiques de pique-nique. Quite a mouthful.
Wow. The lasting friendship of the band of brothers of the Bacchic picnic. Bacchic, related to Bacchus, the god of wine.
That's the one. It's basically a satire about a gourmand musketeer who's more focused on raiding food stashes than fighting enemies, and it features drunken antics. So the very first known pique-nique is linked to gluttony, drunkenness, and military satire during civil unrest.
That is quite a departure from the pastoral ideal we have today. A really fascinating, messy origin.
Isn't it?
So how did we get from drunken musketeers picking trifles to, refined outdoor meals? Did the French meaning evolve quickly after that?
Well, not really, according to the source. The French dictionary definition from 1694 by a guy named Menage describes pique-nique as a shared meal where guests pay their share, but crucially, there's no mention of eating outdoors.
Oh, okay.
Even by 1840, the Académie Française still defined it primarily as just a shared meal, still not necessarily outside.
So the original French pique-nique was fundamentally an indoor potluck where everyone just chipped in.
That appears to be the case, yeah. The English usage comes in a bit later. Lord Chesterfield uses picnic in 1748, and he associates it with card playing, drinking, conversation again, not necessarily outdoors. Then Cornelia Knight uses pique-nique around 1800 when she's describing travels in France.
And this is where the real linguistic twist happens, right? Where the meaning changes.
This seems to be the key insight from the source, yeah. Picnic in English only started referring specifically to an outdoor meal at the beginning of the 19th century. So that outdoor association that feels so central to us now is actually a relatively recent development for the word itself.
But people were definitely having fancy meals outside long before the 19th century, surely, like thinking about medieval hunts and things.
Oh, absolutely. The source definitely notes the historical practice of elegant outdoor meals taken during breaks from hunting, going way back to the Middle Ages.
Right, like in that 1723 painting, Hunt Picnic by Francois Lemoyne. I think I've seen that.
Exactly that one. It depicts this beautiful setup, white cloth, wine, bread, roast chicken, all during a hunt. It's clearly an outdoor feast.
So they had the act of the outdoor meal, the feast, but they just didn't call it a picnic yet. That feels like a strange disconnect.
Well, according to Levy, who's cited in the source, that's exactly the puzzle. He claims the English didn't actually apply the name picnic to that kind of hunter's meal until after 1806, when they started using it for pretty much any outdoor meal.
Huh.
And here's the really layered part. The French, ironically, were apparently hesitant to call any outdoor meal pique-nique until the English specifically adopted the word for outdoor dining.
You're kidding.
No. Only then did the French dictionary definition start acknowledging it could be outdoors.
So wait, the English essentially borrowed the French word, gave it the specific outdoor meaning we know, and then the French adopted the English meaning for their own word. That's not just translation. That's like a whole cultural feedback loop shaping the word's definition.
It's really fascinating, isn't it? It shows how the meaning wasn't static or, unilaterally defined. The usage, particularly in England, seems to have reshaped the French understanding of their own term's potential.
Okay, and speaking of French influence in that early 19th century period, the French Revolution apparently plays a part in spreading the idea of the picnic, too.
It did, yeah. As French aristocrats fled the revolution and emigrated, they took their traditions with them, including elements of their social gatherings that would eventually get wrapped up in the idea of picnicking. And this seems linked to the formation of that fashionable picnic society in London in 1802.
The Picnic Society? That sounds pretty exclusive.
It definitely was. Over 200 aristocratic members, described as Francophiles or maybe even French expats themselves, active during a brief period of peace with France.
Right. What did they actually do? Is it just about having fancy meals?
Well, their stated purpose was theatrical entertainments and lavish meals, followed by gambling. But here's the really surprising detail from the source. They met in hired rooms in Tottenham Street, indoors.
Wait, hold on. A picnic society that met indoors. That completely contradicts everything we think of about a picnic today. How does the source explain that?
It seems to tie right back to that earlier French meaning we were talking about.
Okay.
The source explains they had no kitchen facilities in these rooms, so all the food had to be prepared elsewhere and brought in. And crucially, each member was expected to provide a share of the entertainment and a share of the refreshments.
Got it. So their picnic was less about the location being outdoors and much more about the social structure that shared contribution to a communal meal and entertainment, just like the older French pique-nique meaning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This society is kind of a perfect illustration of the term being used in England right when it was starting to get its outdoor association. But this particular group was clearly holding on to that older indoor shared contribution meaning. It really highlights that the shift wasn't, immediate or uniform across the board.
Okay, so from that rather peculiar indoor society, let's move into the Victorian era, because that's when picnics become famously elaborate, right? Especially with someone like Mrs. Beeton involved.
Oh, definitely. Claudia Roden, who's cited in the source, describes Mrs. Beeton's menus from her 1861 Book of Household Management as lavish and extravagant. And her suggested bill of fare for a picnic for 40 people is just staggering.
40 people. Wow, that wasn't just a casual get-together. What kind of quantity and variety are we talking about here?
The list is immense. Huge joints of cold meat. There's roast beef, boiled beef, lamb, fowls, ducks, ham, ton, multiple pies, including veal and ham pie, pigeon pie, lobsters, collared calf's head.
Sorry, collared calf's head. At a picnic.
I know, it's definitely not on my standard picnic list. Plus, extensive salads and lettuces and cucumbers, stewed fruit in bottles, and just a vast array of pastries, biscuits, and cakes.
And the source mentioned a large cold Christmas pudding. Seriously.
Yes. A cold Christmas pudding is right there on her list, along with fresh fruit, cheese, pounds of butter, copious bread and rolls, and tea. Interestingly, Mrs. Beaton specifically advises against coffee, saying it's not suitable for a picnic being difficult to make.
That entire menu sounds less like a casual meal and more like a military supply chain operation just to transport and serve it all. It really shows the level of effort and, frankly, wealth involved for the upper classes back then.
No, absolutely. It's a world away from the contemporary examples.
Yeah.
The source also mentions, simple sandwiches, hard-boiled eggs, cold chicken, or in America, things like cold fried chicken, deviled eggs, cakes, cold sodas are typical.
And then you still have these very specific, elegant, modern examples, like the Glenbourne Opera Champagne menu that was mentioned with caviar mousse, cold duck, peaches.
Right, which just demonstrates that while simpler fare is maybe more common today overall, that potential for extravagance and really specific refined menus at certain events definitely still exists. It kind of echoes that Victorian scale, just in a different form perhaps.
Picnics aren't always just about the food, though, are they? The source talks about organized activities often being a key part of them.
Yeah, they often are. Outdoor games or other kinds of entertainment are noted as common, especially at larger gatherings.
Like back in the mid-19th century U.S.
Exactly. Picnic games were apparently organized by charities for fundraising back then. Later, in the 1880s, you had companies sponsoring picnic events for publicity or employee relations. And what's a really significant historical detail from the source is how during segregation, the Black community organized games like baseball at picnics in parks and fairgrounds. It was partly a way to assert respectability and build important community spaces.
That's a really powerful example of how a seemingly simple social event can have much deeper meaning and purpose. What about games that actually involve the food itself? Did the source mention those?
It did, yeah. Things like a watermelon relay, where actually transporting the heavy food is part of the game. Or spitting contests using fruit seeds or stones after you've eaten the fruit.
A cherry stone spitting contest right next to the collared calf's head and the cold Christmas pudding. Maybe for dessert, perhaps.
Maybe. But yeah, the logistics for these large community picnics were apparently serious business, creating schedules, organizing specific events for different age groups and genders, publicizing everything with handbills and tickets. It just underscores that these weren't always spontaneous, casual little affairs. They could be quite structured.
And taking that idea of purpose even further, picnics have actually been used for pretty significant political and even religious gatherings, too.
Yeah, this is where the use of public space really comes into play. The source highlights that picnics can function as a kind of temporary occupation of significant territory, sometimes for political protest or demonstration.
And the most striking example mentioned has to be the Pan-European picnic in 1989.
Oh, absolutely. Held right on the border between Hungary and Austria. It was described as this mass meal that played a direct role in weakening the Iron Curtain and really contributing to the struggle for German reunification. It indirectly led towards the collapse of the Soviet Union, according to the source.
Wow.
Yeah, this simple act of gathering and sharing food across a previously heavily guarded border became incredibly symbolic and impactful.
And France had a massive one for the millennium, didn't they?
They did. France's L'Incroyable Pique-Nique, the incredible picnic in 2000 for the Bastille Day Millennium Celebration. Apparently it stretched 1,000 kilometers along the Méridien Vert, just a huge symbolic communal meal, presumably demonstrating national unity or pride.
Amazing. And then on the religious side, church picnics are a very common tradition, aren't they?
Oh, definitely. Annual events for congregations and communities, usually late summer into fall, socializing, food, games, they're central. The source mentions a massive 1937 congregational church event in New York that drew something like 2,000 people.
2,000.
Yeah. And there's this rather provocative quote mentioned from a Dr. George W. Crane, who called Christ feeding the 5,000 the first church picnic.
Huh. Calling that miraculous biblical event the first church picnic. That's quite a bold interpretation, isn't it? Framing it in a very relatable, modern way. It connects a deeply traditional act right back to this concept of community gathering around food.
Okay, so from community events and political statements, the picnic has also seeped really deep into arts and culture, hasn't it?
Oh, extensively. Film, painting, literature, music. The picnic provides such a rich setting and theme.
In film, there's the Oscar-winning 1955 movie Picnic. But there's a paradox there, isn't there? Something about the picnic itself.
Yes, the paradox is, as the source points out, there is no picnic in Picnic. Apparently, the characters pack all the classic picnic food, potato salad, sandwiches, deviled eggs, but they get so caught up in all the drama and romance that they end up leaving the food completely untouched in the car.
So the title uses the idea of a picnic, maybe as a backdrop or a symbol of opportunity or community, that the characters kind of fail to fully engage with.
That's fascinating, using the title to actually highlight the lack of the thing. Any other notable films mentioned?
Well, there's The Office Picnic from 1972, which is an Australian dark comedy. And of course, the very famous 1975 mystery film Picnic at Hanging Rock, based on the novel. It's about those mysterious disappearances during a school outing. One girl's found later with amnesia, but the fate of the others just remains unknown.
Right, so it can be the setting for deep psychological mystery and these unexplained events, a really sharp contrast to the typical lighthearted image we have.
Indeed. And also Baji on the Beach from 1993, a British film about an excursion taken by a group of Indian women. The source highlights specific details about their picnic food: a flask of chai and a tiffin container with papadums and, interestingly, sweaty samosas. Those kinds of sensory details really ground the cultural context of their meal.
Painting also uses the picnic as a motif quite a bit.
Oh yeah, especially in romantic American landscape painting. Starting around the 1830s, you often see picnickers appearing in the foreground, enjoying the beauty of these spectacular natural scenes. Thomas Cole's painting The Picnic from 1846 is a great example cited.
What does the Cole painting show? What's the scene like?
It shows this rather genteel group picnicking in the Hudson River Valley. You can see the Catskills in the distance. They've got blue and white china plates. There's a guitarist playing, and people are strolling around or boating after their meal. It really captures that idyllic, leisurely vision of a picnic.
And then, of course, there's Manet's famous, maybe infamous, Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, lunch on the grass.
Yes, from 1862. It's still quite controversial because it places this nude female figure and another scantily dressed bather right alongside two fully dressed men in this rural picnic scene. The juxtaposition really challenges conventions, and it uses the picnic setting to explore some pretty complex social dynamics and artistic themes. It caused quite a stir.
I bet. And is there a modern take mentioned that adds another layer?
Yes. Kerry James Marshall's Painting Pastimes from 1997. It depicts a black family picnicking on a classic gingham blanket by a lake. The source highlights specific details like having two radios playing different music simultaneously. The Temptations and Snoop Dogg and figures in the background are engaged in activities often associated with affluent suburban white culture, like golf or croquet. So it seems to use the picnic scene to make a kind of commentary on leisure, race, and social spaces in America.
And literature seems absolutely packed with picnics, too.
It's such a classic literary scene, isn't it?
Right.
From Omar Khayyam's 12th Century Rubaiyat, and that enduring image of a book of verse beneath the bough, a loaf of bread, a jug of wine, and thou. You know, that simple, sensual outdoor meal for two.
And Jane Austen includes them, right? Though maybe they weren't always terribly successful picnics in her books.
Yeah, exactly. In Emma from 1816, there are two outdoor picnics mentioned, one in a strawberry garden and another at Box Hill. Mrs. Elton is super enthusiastic about them, but the food is only vaguely described as a cold collation, and both outings apparently end with ruffled tempers and hurt feelings. So Austen uses the picnic setting brilliantly to reveal character flaws and social awkwardness, showing it's not automatically a happy, perfect occasion.
Alfred Tennyson gives us a bit more detail, though.
He does. In his 1838 poem Audley Court, he describes the food very specifically: dark bread, cold game pie set in aspic, and cider. And they're enjoying it on an orchard slope while talking about old love affairs. It feels very specific and sensory.
Even Dickens touches on it, apparently defining potluck.
Yeah, in The Mystery of Edwin Drood from 1870, he defines potluck. And Levy, who we mentioned earlier, argues Dickens differentiates it from a picnic by noting a character brings her contribution, which is a veal pie, specifically to a picnic.
Okay, and maybe the most iconic literary picnic of all. Has to be.
Kenneth Grahame's The Wind in the Willows, right, from 1908. That opening scene with Ratty arriving staggering under a fat wicker luncheon basket and meticulously setting out the spread on a tablecloth is, I think for many people, the absolute quintessential idyllic picnic scene in all of literature.
Yeah, I can picture it now. But just like the films, literature can use the picnic for much darker themes too, can it?
Oh, definitely. There's Fernando Arrabal's 1959 absurdist drama Picnic on the Battlefield. It's set during a war, and a soldier's parents come to visit him right on the battlefield with a picnic basket full of food, sausage, eggs, ham, sandwiches, salad, cakes, red wine. They even invite an enemy soldier to join them.
Wow.
It's completely surreal and ultimately tragic. It ends with them all being killed by machine gun fire while they're trying to dance to music from a wind-up gramophone. The picnic becomes the stark symbol of the absurdity and tragedy of war just crashing into normal life.
That's incredibly bleak. A stark contrast indeed. What about the phrase, no picnic? Where does that come in?
That comes up with Felice Benuzzi's 1946 book, No Picnic on Mount Kenya. It's the true story of 3 Italian POWs who escaped a British camp in Kenya specifically to climb Mount Kenya using totally improvised gear.
Amazing story.
It is, and the title refers to that common idiom, it was no picnic, meaning it was incredibly difficult. But it has this ironic link to their severely meager rations as POWs and then on the actual climb. The source connects it to a similar line in a 1935 book about climbing the mountain as well.
Got it. And finally, there's even a sci-fi interpretation.
Yeah, Boris and Arkady Strugatsky's 1972 novel Roadside Picnic. This was the source material for Tarkovsky's famous film Stalker. The central concept revolves around this mysterious, dangerous zone, which contains weird alien artifacts. And one theory proposed by scientists in the book is that the zone and everything in it are simply the refuse, the trash, left behind from a brief alien picnic on Earth.
So a casual alien lunch break caused all that strangeness and danger. It basically frames the vast cosmic unknown as just discarded leftovers from someone else's meal.
Pretty much. A mind-bending idea applied to the humble picnic concept.
And music, of course, provides its own picnic soundtrack.
Definitely.
The absolute classic has to be Teddy Bear's Picnic, right?
Oh, it's quite a history. John Walter Bratton composed the original instrumental piece way back in 1906. It was popular just like that. And then Jimmy Kennedy added the now famous lyrics in 1932. Henry Hall's recording became a huge million seller.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a theme song for radio shows, apparently even the theme for the AHL Hershey Bears Hockey Club.
It's surprisingly enduring, isn't it? That tune and those lyrics.
It really is. And then you have other songs like Stone's Soul Picnic by Laura Nyro, which was a hit for the Fifth Dimension back in 1968. That uses the idea of a picnic for maybe a more spiritual or communal kind of gathering. And Roxette's 1996 song, June Afternoon, just captures that simple joy of people relaxing and eating together in a park on a sunny day.
So it clearly resonates across different musical styles and eras as well. It keeps popping up. So, okay, after taking this pretty deep dive into the source material, what can we really say about the humble picnic? We started with this very simple, familiar image.
And we've really journeyed through a surprisingly complex history, haven't we? From, a strange French word linked to gluttony and civil unrest, to a symbol of an aristocratic social structure that wasn't even necessarily outdoors at first.
Right.
Then a canvas for incredible Victorian excess, a tool for political statements and community organization, and this constant inspiration and setting across art, literature, and music.
It really emphasizes how this act that feels so natural and simple to us just eating outdoors with other people is actually layered with centuries of evolving meaning, shifting social dynamics, and really widespread cultural representation.
Yeah, we've seen all those contrasts. Its original indoor shared cost nature versus its modern outdoor association, these exclusive, super formal gatherings versus informal, community-focused ones. Meals that were these huge logistical feats of extravagance versus just simple portable bites. And the setting for leisurely enjoyment versus being a backdrop for high drama, political protest, or even, philosophical speculation about aliens. It's really anything but simple when you unpack it.
So maybe here's a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. The next time you have a meal outside, whether it's just, a solitary sandwich on a park bench or maybe a full-blown gathering with friends and family, just consider what deep dive that seemingly simple act might hold for you. Are you just having lunch? Or are you maybe in some small way tapping into this incredibly rich, complex history, these shifting social dynamics, and this huge cultural presence we've been talking about, perhaps without even realizing it?